Okay, today's the day I install Windows Home Server 2011, my base image, my gold master, my template in production. So finally I've built my ESXi server the way I want it, ESXi 5.0, and I'm ready to move my installer ISO files in. I actually need one file, and I'm going to use something called Veeam Fast SCP to do that. So when we launch Veeam, you do a default install, next, download it for free. This is what Veeam looks like. We need to add our ESXi host. So if we right-click on servers and say add server, type in ESXi, which is the name of my ESXi host. Next. No need to click advanced. Connect when I finish. Sure. It's pretty simple. Open up the tree. Looks just like WinSCP or FileZilla if you're used to those things. All right, next. My install is going to happen on an SSD, and then I'm going to deploy from that template to my fastest SSD on a RAID controller. So here's the SSD. This is the ISO folder I want to move the file into. There's a regular home server. I actually have a different version I'm going to grab from my computer, my D drive, ISO folder. What we want here is this version, storage server. Copy. Go to the target and paste. If we watch my network I/O, not much is happening in the beginning. It's setting up a secure connection, and then it does a plain FTP transfer of the actual data. It goes about 6 to 8 times quicker than data store browser within VMware does. Okay, so that file is cruising along at a decent gigabit-like speed. If I were to use this thing, browse data store, and poke around this way, I just get a whole lot slower file transfer. So I'm going to go with Veeam. Alright, so Veeam is cranking away in the background. I can go ahead and start configuring. So we're going to right-click on ESXi and say New Virtual Machine. Typical is fine. What is the name I want to give it? Well, I like to use the actual file name. Let me explain. In Veeam, you can see here's the name of the file we copied from. Sorry, here it is. Let's go back up here. If we hit F2 to rename, then right-click, copy. We've now copied the file name to the clipboard. Great. Now for the virtual machine name, the template name, it's very obvious when I paste that in, get rid of the dot at the end, that's not a bad name. It shows exactly what DVD I installed this from and exactly what version of Windows I'm making here a template of. So now I click Next. Where do I want to put it? In my case, I already said I'm putting it on my Kingston solid state with 90 gig available. Windows Server 2008 R2 64-bit is correct. That's what Home Server 2011 is based on. One network adapter, base network type is fine. We're going to change that to a faster driver VMXNet 3 later. If we do it now, we'll break the install. We need network accessibility for Vmware Tools before the virtual machine is done being built. Okay, I want to thin provision it. I'm making a base template, and I don't have that much room on the SSD. I need to pretend to Windows that I have 160 gig available when I actually only have 90 in the SSD. Yeah, not a great idea. I might end up filling up the SSD, but I've done this before. I know it's going to use nowhere near that many gigabytes as it lays down this template. And it's warning me, are you sure you want to do this? I'm going to say yes. Now we want to edit the virtual machine settings because we haven't told it where the ISO file is yet. So here we go. Notice it's not going to install, it just has a blank hard drive. We need to point to this ISO file, and we need to make sure the ISO file is turned on at power on. Otherwise, it'll boot and see a blank 160 gig hard drive, and the install will fail. 160 gig is the minimum size home server installs to if you don't, without any special tweaks. Let's let that transfer finish. Get this out of the way now. We can see we got relatively smooth throughput. Okay, so now that that file is fully transferred, when we browse the data store, go to the Kingston solid-state drive ISO folder, we can see we've got the correct installer, which is storage server. This version handles 25 PC backups. This one handles 10. That's the primary difference between these two. They're both based on 2008 R2. Click OK, and click Finish. Excellent. We're now ready to right-click on this thing and open up a console. And we're going to boot it for the very first time, clicking the play button and watching it boot. The installer begins. And I'm going to slide it to the upper left corner so you can see as much as possible. I'm going to start a stopwatch here in the bottom right corner. And we'll get an idea how long the install takes. Let me slide this. Okay, that looks good. Pick New Install. It's warning me I'm going to nuke the data on this empty disk. That's fine. And now it's going to begin to lay down. Well, it's going to take the files out of the ISO and expand them and start writing the file system, installing Windows. Now while it's doing that, we can look here. I'm hitting Control Escape to release my mouse. Okay, now I can go back here and look at performance of this virtual machine we just created. If we go to the Advanced tab and check out disk, we can see disk rate, which is just starting to climb, hasn't really done much yet. Let's go back to looking at what it says here. It's expanding files. Here we can kind of size it so we can see a couple things going on here. Something like this should work. And there we go. We can see the data starting to flow here as it's expanding those files. So there's really no huge lulls in the installation. There's a fair amount of questions coming up for a Home Server 2011 install that's which is the same as this Windows Storage Server 2008 R2 Essentials. The installs look identical. You end up with just different color backgrounds when you're done. But basically both of those variants of Home Server differ quite a bit from a normal 2008 R2 install and take a little longer with more questions. So I can go ahead and just leave the video recording, probably for the whole duration. So you'll see in the bottom right corner here that we're at 2.5 minutes, roughly. And it's still expanding files. So you can see the most usage here is this entity, the ISO file. I guess we'll just leave the graph like that. Something to look at on the right side, which is otherwise kind of unused. Oops, should not have clicked it. Okay, we're at 92%. Three and a half minutes. I should point out this is a SATA 2 Intel port on the motherboard, Z68 ASRock motherboard. And it's a SATA 2 2-year-old technology Kingston SSD. A year and a half old. So it's not the latest generation of SATA 3 device with a 550 megabits read and write kind of speed. It's about half that. Still, this should be a relatively speedy install given we're doing a solid state drive here, which we've thin provisioned, which can impact performance on a regular spinning drive a fair amount. Well, it depends. You got to measure it because it has to grow, kind of like a swap file has to grow a large file. It's better to carve up the space all in one big chunk up front for speed. But I'm trying to make a template here and have it use up as little space as possible. So think of it as kind of an image of an operating system that's kind of WinZipped as it lives in the file system. The VMDK file represents a hard drive on the VMFS file system. That's the formatting of the SSD. It will have a large file in there, but it's certainly not going to be 160 gig in size when we're done here with the install. That's what thin provisioning means to us here in this context. So we ripped right through those first 4 green checkboxes. We can see on the bar graph on the right that hard drive I/O has settled down. We're probably at a point now where if we were to look at CPU, we might see something interesting. So it's doing something, but not so much a hard drive I/O at this point. Coming up, we should see our first reboot. First of several reboots that are normal. Think of this as a 2008 R2 scripted install, which has some special services and configuration scripts, so post-install scripts that run and ask you some questions that really turn it into a home server. A very basic 2008 backup and file sharing server. So we're looking at the first reboot. CPU pretty busy on the right there. Let's see if we can get an overview view to show both CPU and disk, and probably no such luck. Okay. Notice the logo at the bottom. Windows Storage Server 2008 R2 Essentials, that crazy long name. We're past the 7-minute mark into the install at this point. Not too obvious what it's doing at this phase of the install. Check in on the CPU. CPU's not doing much either. Okay, it's ready and asking us some questions. So click here, get our mouse in there, US keyboard, English for me, next. Change my clock. Change my time zone, and Eastern time zone in my case. And I'm going to turn off internet time syncing. Why? Because Vmware Tools is what I'm going to install on the virtual machine and sync the clock that way. Because my ESX host has a perfect clock sync already. Okay. Not sure. Okay, well, got an offset in the clock. That's all right. That's going to go away when we get this thing installed. Click OK. UTC -5, so it is Eastern Time Zone now. Click Next. Accept the EULA. Here's what the EULA looks like. It's now recorded on the video. Next. Product key. I don't need to do that right now. Okay, what do we want to call it? Well, this gets interesting. If we deploy from template and kind of lobotomize or sysprep the machine, we can rename it, but I know mine's going to be called this. That's what I'm going to call my virtual machine. That's my new, backup storage server. And I don't really want to rename it. This product has a lot of hooks in the host name. I'm going to just better my odds of having no issues and just stick with that name, Vzilla. Do not check for updates at this time. So we're now 10 minutes into the install. I talked a little too much and was a little slow in answering those questions. Could probably shave a little bit of time off there. CPU getting busy again. Kind of curious if the disk is doing anything at this phase. No, not really. Although there's a little lag here. Okay. Another reboot. I could point out that on the bottom here you don't get events showing in vCenter because it didn't trigger the reboot. So if we told the virtual machine to reboot, you'd see it on the bottom here through the vSphere GUI. But since it rebooted on its own, it's not going to show up there. This is kind of a teaser look at your desktop because it jumps right back into scripts. It's now setting things up, continuing the setup. It says it may take up to 30 minutes. Not even close on a solid-state drive and a nice Core i7 at 3.4 gigahertz. It'll be a whole lot quicker than that. CPU is kind of busy. Let's see if the disk is doing anything. Disk is not doing anything. Maximum latency on the data store, 31 milliseconds, not bad. That's what you expect for solid state, very low. And CPU not even all that busy either. Memory use. Back to watching that. And what do you know, it's rebooting again. "13 minutes. And counting. So what I've noticed on occasion is if I put VMware Tools in the template, occasionally I'll have an issue when I clone or deploy from that template a new copy. I don't know why. My mouse will be messed up or something. So for me, for now, in a 5.0 anyway, I'm going to go ahead with a very basic base image. And what I mean is I'm not installing anything. I'm just letting Windows finish doing its thing. I now have the desktop. And that's it. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm now going to shut down the virtual machine. Remember, because we didn't do Windows updates automatically, it wasn't all busy trying to look on the web for updates or for Microsoft servers to pull down a bunch of patches. I intentionally left that off. So we could make another template that has tools and it has updates, but I don't plan to deploy this very often. Windows 7, I'll probably put more effort into making a kind of a masterpiece of a template and testing it and seeing if tools works after cloning and all that. For this one, it's really a one-off. I'd just rather save the last 15 minutes spent on the install and never do it again. So we now know we have about a 15-minute install. So we can close that console now. We can bring up vSphere again, vSphere client, and let's get rid of stopwatch. We're kind of done there. And go back to a normal view. So what do we have here? Well, what happens when you right-click? We have a template option. What happens when you look in there? It says clone to template or convert to template. This thing's already thin provisioned. I don't need to do anything other than just convert it to a template. And it's done at the bottom. Now, why did it disappear? Well, no big deal. Just change this view to include templates. Now we can see it again. So here's our template. Okay, you're following that, I hope. And it tells us exactly what it is. You right-click it. The option that says deploy virtual machine from this template sounds great. In inventory, I'm going to call it Vzilla. I don't have anything else called Vzilla. We named the host Vzilla inside, but we never laid down a file in the file system, just calling something plain old Vzilla. And I could say something like comments here, Windows Storage Server 2008 R2. So now we have an informative look at what it is, but I like to begin with hostname. That's the easiest thing to spot and be consistent about. Click Next. Which ESXi host? I only have one. Okay, selected virtual disk format. Now let's see. We are on the Kingston. The Kingston still has 73 left, so I believe we only lost about 20 gig when we deployed from this template. Now we're ready to go into production, and I told you I want to put it on the most empty and fastest SSD I got, which is an SSD by Samsung, also SATA 2 speeds because of it's an older SSD, but it's on the LSA rate controller, so I get my best throughput over there. So I'm going to deploy over on this other solid state that has much more room to grow. And I'm basically just going to keep an eye on things. This is a thin provisioned virtual machine that is going to start to blow up and fill up the Samsung, and that'd be bad. So if I start stuffing a whole bunch on my C drive on this home server, I can always migrate it to some much bigger data store. Not really a big deal. So I don't really need to use Acronis and resize it and all. I'm probably just going to leave it as is. So do I want it the same format as the source where it's thin provisioned? Sure, because it's a solid state. So I'm not so worried about I have to do that to fit it, to shoehorn it into this 112 available. Click Next. I do not want to customize it. Again, this is home server. It's a little particular about that. And finish. So now we're done with the template view. We can go back to the normal view. And we should see something called Vzilla. Well, why don't we see it? Because it's still copying the large files. So we got to wait. You'll see it'll tell us start and stop, how long it'll take to do this. And if we have a look at performance right now, we should see at an ESXi level on performance, and just take a look. Get this nice summary view. Make this a little smaller down here. We can get an idea of what's happened. vCenter has been left running all along. Everything else is turned off. If we look at vCenter itself in summary, we can see it's using 4.5 gig of host memory. Wow. So we really can't shrink it. It wanted 8 is what's provisioned. It's kind of crazy big. But anyhow, the lesson learned there is if I move it down, or I probably just leave that appliance alone as is. Let's go back to performance here. CPU is doing something. Fine. It says only 9%. So we have a bit of a wait here as we move from one controller to another, from one solid state to another. So at this point, the video is showing nothing terribly useful. We're at 20 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording of this video until it's done making this copy. If I were to have cloned from the same solid state I'm on to another spot in the same solid state, obviously it would have been a bit quicker. Okay, pausing now. Okay, resume the video because it went from 40% to 98% to done. It just jumped. So it really only took 3-4 minutes. Actually, let's not guess. Right there. It says the start and the stop time. And it took about 5 minutes. So nice and speedy. So now Vzilla shows up. If we edit it, we'll see the DVD is still attached. We don't need that anymore, so let's turn that off. Let's look at the template. I just realized we kind of messed up the template, didn't we? So this will be a good little lesson to learn in the template. Watch what happens in the template. Can you edit its properties? No. So you have to convert it to virtual machine, which is pretty much instant. Let me think about that. Hang on. I got to read that more carefully. This is the template. Convert to virtual machine, deploy, clone, rename. Okay, yeah. Convert to virtual machine. I think this is the, it should be the instant process. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. In progress completed. Yeah, that was darn close to instant. All right, so now we can go and edit. And we can make a change. Like, we don't need the, whoops, that's the network adapter. We don't need the DVD attached at boot time. And we don't need to point to that data store file either. Let's see if the setting stuck. In other words, sorry, let me let that finish. Okay, at the bottom it says it's reconfigured and completed. If we go in again, that DVD can do funny things if you point to the data store file. It's always going to show attached to that solid state we installed from. I want to kind of divorce that. It's done. So we point to client device, we turn off the turn power on, and we're good. Now we're ready to right-click, and whoops, right-click, template, convert to template, and we're all set. Let's go back to the normal view. Host and clusters. There's our vCenter server. Here's our new Vzilla. Let's go to edited settings and do what we did to the other. That is, it's DVD, point to host device, click here. We're good to go. Open console, boot it. So this is a bit-for-bit copy. It's going to look exactly like we had before. It's just going to boot home server and have a desktop without any icons really. But we then need to install Vmware Tools on it to get ready for production to actually do duties here of backups in my case. So let's let that boot. We're now 26 minutes from when we started creating the first virtual machine template and deploy from it. Control-Alt-Insert to get the Control-Delete pass through to the VM. Bottom left corner, it tells us these things. There's little tips here in the bottom left corner that popped up. Like to hit Control-Alt-Insert. All right, so here's our virtual machine. Let's get a little better resolution here, although I want to fit it in the recording window. No, I'm going to have to leave it at that. Let's just get tools installed, then we can deal with multiple resolutions. How do we install tools? Click on VM, Guest, Install Tools. So it's kind of hidden, but it's also right here in the bar. It will improve our mouse and so forth. Let's slide that up so you can click OK. And we wait. Autoplay starts. We want to run the setup. Mouse looks funny. It acts a little goofy. We want to install tools so that we can then replace it with an optimized network driver as well. Then I'm going to hard code the IP address. OK. Typical, complete, custom. Print spooling. Oh, there's all kinds of options here. I'm going to keep it. Well, I want to show in the video what custom has. There's a lot in here. Virtual printing, Wise multimedia, a lot of stuff. This is a server and largely headless. So again, we'll be fine with typical, which is going to get me that optimized network driver that I want. And the mouse and the keyboard and the video will look good and work well. So I'm doing a typical install of VMware Tools. You saw it just briefly echo that I had installed the network driver. We're coming up on 30 minutes in. Took us 2-3 minutes to, let's see, kick off an ISO file transfer. When it was there, while it was transferring, we were creating the virtual machine. So yeah, we're probably at about 33 minutes since I actually started. But from when we kind of actually initiated Windows Installer, that took 15 minutes, as you probably recall. Okay, so VMware Tools is installed. Watch what happens when we click Finish. It warns us we got to reboot for anything to take effect. This part's a little odd, but I'm going to say no, and you're going to see why in a second. I'm going to shut down right away. Again, you'll see why. Tools install is done. Let's take a look. It's all gray. I'm going to go to Edit Settings, and now it's time to replace the network adapter. I don't want this E100 one, so I'm going to remove it. I'm going to add a new Ethernet adapter, and this one is the VMXNet 3, the speediest one. Knowledge base article here explains the differences in the speeds. And basically saying this one's optimized for virtual environment and gives you the best speed. And there you go, including 2008 R2. So, all right, VMXNet 3, VM network, that's the default. Connect the power on, it all looks good. Just click Next and Finish. So in the end, we have one new network adapter and the old one removed. We're now ready to power on again. If we look here at the vCenter client, you can see these power on operations. A little bit of a history of what we've done here, including initialize VMware Tools install. Okay, the window jumped. I'm not sure why. Let me bring it up to the upper left corner here again. Okay, so we should get decent mouse support now, and let's click, there you go, Ethernet adapter installed. So Windows keeps kind of a history, and we had a DHCP adapter, now we installed a new one, but either way, this sequence I did this in was very much intentional. Now we're ready to go ahead and hard code the IP. I also like to customize this, and I want to show all things that are running on this server. So we can see VMware Tools is running. Before I forget, let's right-click on Tools and select with our left mouse button Open VMware Tools. Remember what I said about the time? Let's fix that. So if we do adjust time here and go to Internet time, remember we turned that off? Doesn't look like it's off. Interesting. So I'm going to turn that off again. Go back in, adjust time, see if it sticks. Good. So it's not double NTP time syncing. Just VMware Tools is now taking care of those duties right there. Okay, that's that. Networking. Home network, that's good. So it sniffed out the network as home type. I like to give the network adapter a decent name. I don't like that name so much. So what I'm going to do is thinking, sorry, what my old one was versus the new one. Okay. And that's how I start my name. Then I say the type of adapter, and then I say the speed of the adapter. That's just my own kind of convention. Because this machine is going to spend its life with a fixed IP, that way it's real obvious what it's supposed to be set at. Now I'm going to open the properties of that adapter, double-click TCP/IP4, and take care of hard coding it right now. If we take a look before we do that, it's always good to see where we're at. Notice that IP is available. Nothing's responding to ping on it. Okay, gateway. All right, that's that. Next. Got VMware Tools installed. Got our network adapter just right. Let's look at our computer name. Remember we said that during the install? Let's see if it shows lowercase. It does. So you'll notice that Windows now preserves case. Another thing you'll notice is remote settings. I definitely want to use remote control, and that's on by default in this install, so that's not something we have to set or tweak. You'll see our operating system. You'll see it's been given 4 gig of RAM. That is fine for my needs. I could crank it up at some point. And I've changed the clock. I've installed tools. Let me take a look at resolutions again. Yeah, I wish we had 102.4.720 right there. I do. Let's fix that. Okay, and then up here we can say view fit the window now. And now we have a nice viewport to record the entire desktop. Excellent. Corner to corner. And now we're ready to reboot. Why am I rebooting? When I hard code the IP like that and change the clock, I like a nice clean start before I go monkeying with the operating system. So at this point, I'm in a good place here to launch configuring this virtual machine. Carving up disks. In my case, I'm going to do USB 3.0 pass-through and format a nice external NTFS RAID array. That's 5 terabytes in size, and that's going to be where my backups are stored. So I'm ready to begin that, customization stuff that goes on with a home server like this. That boot was pretty fast. I'm liking this so far. We should take a peek at how much disk space we've actually taken up. So if we look at the underlying file system and go to Vzilla, go to Summary, and go to its data store, you'll see that we provision 164, but it's only using 13 gig. So we're in no danger of running out. That's the point. 13 gig total. Okay. If we go to ESXi, click on Configuration, click on Storage, and click on, let's sort by capacity. The small solid states kind of pop to the top of the list. And the one that we're on right now is the LSI RAID adapter controlling the SSD. And you'll see I still have 96 gig free, 99 gig. So we're good for plenty of growth here, installing, plugins and so forth on home server. Not that much gets installed on home server, so we should be fine for quite a while. Okay, clock looks perfect. It's synced with the underlying ESXi host. And that really concludes this video of how to install Windows Home Server. The last piece to know if Home Server is healthy and happy would be to go ahead and log in its dashboard. So let me do that. Excellent. Came up fast. And we've got a whole bunch of checkboxes to go through here and to configure. That's really, that's not so much creating the virtual machine, that's more configuring Home Server. I just wanted to know this GUI came up, I didn't get any weird, goofy errors. Users, computers, and backups, we haven't added anything yet. Folders, all we have is a D drive, because we haven't added an E drive or anything yet. And add-ins, of course, are blank. If we go to server settings, we can see the clock, we can see automatic updates are not configured. So before I go laying down any data and formatting an NTFS 5 terabyte RAID array, this is probably a good time to make sure I turn that on. I'm going to go ahead and let Windows do its thing and check for updates. Just kind of let it rip. To really test out the network, not only should we ping it, but make sure it's accessible from outside this box, this virtual machine. So if we look at domain, it gives us a reminder how to install the client. So let's go ahead and do that. Type that in, bring up a copy of Internet Explorer on a different machine, and doing what it says. Lowercase is fine. And it worked. So I'm now able to install and download the client on another machine. And that's what we expect. Okay, thank you for watching.